It's actually the people around the whole world logging onto Netflix last night to find not one, not two, but 3 episodes from the new Harry and Meghan documentary. And after years of speculation, we got to hear their side of the story, their relationship, and also what happens beyond the tabloid.
The moment did not begin with shouting. It began with silence. Meghan arrived expecting a place in the royal procession, expecting the world to see her walking near the heart of the family again. But Anne had already made her decision. One quiet instruction changed everything. Meghan would not walk with them. She would not be seen beside them. And in that instant, the humiliation became public. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stepped into the waiting room with her composure held in place, but the air had shifted before she understood why. Anne stood near the order sheet, calm, severe, and untouched by the tension gathering around her. The royal procession, a formal walking order used to show rank, unity, and public respect during major ceremonies, had been changed before the doors opened. Meghan's name had been moved out of the senior line. Anne had personally blocked her from joining the central formation, and the message was plain. Meghan could attend the ceremony, but she would not stand inside the royal picture. The aide spoke softly, but the words struck like a sentence delivered in private. Meghan listened, then looked toward Anne, searching for the smallest opening, the faintest sign that this was a mistake. Anne gave her none. The Princess Royal, a title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, carried herself like someone guarding more than a room. She was guarding the image of the crown. Meghan understood that instantly, and the hurt in her face turned into something colder. Not collapse, not defeat, recognition. Had Charles knew before Meghan arrived. The king had seen the revised order, had understood the meaning, and had allowed Anne's decision to stand. That silence mattered, because Charles was the only person in that room with the power to reverse it, without explanation. Yet he did not speak. He did not call Meghan forward. He did not ask Anne to soften the blow. His silence became permission, and permission became punishment. Anne held the room with frightening stillness. Meghan remained near the edge, forced to absorb the truth in front of people trained not to react. The ceremony had been meant to show unity after years of fractures, but Anne believed Meghan's presence in the front line would pull every eye away from duty and back toward conflict. That was why the move cut so deeply. It was not only about position, it was about belonging. And as Meghan stood frozen near the edge of the room, the question became impossible to ignore. Who had truly abandoned her first? This was not just a royal seating change. It was personal. Anne had spent a lifetime protecting the monarchy from spectacle. Meghan had spent years fighting to be seen on her own terms. Harry stood between loyalty to his wife and the cold machinery of the crown. Charles carried the burden of silence. And William watched the room as if he already knew the damage could not be undone. Anne understood what the procession meant, and Meghan understood it too. A royal procession is not only a walk through a ceremony, it is a public sign of rank, acceptance, and trust. That was why the decision burned so deeply. Anne believed the line represented service, hierarchy, and discipline. Meghan believed the walk could mark a symbolic return, a chance to be seen inside the royal frame again, instead of being pushed to the edge of it. 2 women stood on opposite sides of the same moment, and neither saw it as small. Harry saw the shift in Meghan before anyone spoke loudly enough for the room to hear. Her shoulders stayed controlled, but her expression hardened in a way he knew too well. Harry had seen that look after closed meetings, after sharp headlines, after conversations where one sentence carried more pain than a speech. Meghan did not need to explain the wound to him. He understood that being moved out of the procession was not only a public slight, it was a message that the family would still decide when she could be visible and when she had to disappear. Charles felt the weight of that message and still avoided Meghan's eyes. The king knew his silence mattered, because silence from the throne can feel louder than any command. Harry looked toward his father, waiting for even the smallest sign of protection. But Charles gave him none. That refusal landed hard. Anne had made the decision, but Charles had allowed it to live. Meghan saw the avoidance. Harry saw it too. And in that quiet distance between father and son, another fracture opened. William remained still, because he had already been warned. A senior aide had told him that any visible confrontation would swallow the ceremony whole and turn duty into spectacle. The prince chose restraint, but restraint had a cost. Catherine noticed Meghan gripping her gloves so tightly that the fabric twisted between her fingers. Catherine said nothing, yet her eyes stayed on Meghan long enough to understand that the humiliation had arrived before the public ever saw it. The room still had one chance to contain the damage. Anne could have softened. Charles could have stepped forward. William could have broken the silence. Harry could have pulled Meghan away before the wound deepened. But Meghan lifted her head, fixed her eyes on Anne, and chose not to let the order pass unanswered. Because behind the closed doors, before the procession even moved, Meghan chose not to let Anne's order pass unanswered. Every public rupture has a private beginning. This one began weeks earlier, inside a small reception room after a memorial rehearsal. When Meghan made one remark too sharp, Anne answered with one stare too cold, and Harry stepped forward too late. That was the moment the line was drawn. Not in front of cameras, not before the crowd, but in a room where everyone heard enough to remember. Meghan had entered that rehearsal believing she had already been placed too far from the center. The Windsor Memorial rehearsal dispute, as one aide later described it in a documented account, was a private argument over a ceremonial order, meaning the planned position of each royal during a formal event. Meghan saw the order as more than a list. She saw it as proof of whether the family wanted her near them or safely behind them. Anne saw the same paper and read it differently. To her, the order protected discipline, rank, and the purpose of the memorial itself. Anne did not raise her voice when Meghan questioned the placement, and that made the answer feel even colder. Meghan said she would not be used as decoration only when convenient, then pushed aside when the picture needed to look traditional again. Anne replied that the crown was not a stage for personal correction. The words landed hard because they named the conflict everyone had tried to avoid. Meghan wanted recognition. Anne wanted restraint. Neither woman was speaking only about that rehearsal anymore. Harry tried to soften the room, but his timing failed him. He stepped forward after the damage had already been done, and Meghan felt the delay like a second rejection. Harry wanted to protect his wife without turning the rehearsal into a full break with the family, but that middle ground disappeared beneath him. Anne watched his hesitation and judged it in an instant. To her, Harry had not controlled the moment. To Meghan, he had not reached her quickly enough. Charles received the note afterward. Anne sent it through a private palace memo, warning that future ceremonial orders should be reviewed before Meghan was placed anywhere near the senior walking line. A palace memo is a written internal message used to record sensitive decisions without making them public, and this one carried more force than anyone admitted. Charles read it, understood its meaning, and did not reject it. His silence allowed Anne's concern to become policy. The fight was already moving before Meghan knew it. The rehearsal had become the trigger. The note had become the weapon. Anne had turned one sharp exchange into a future decision, and Charles had allowed that decision to harden in the dark. By the time Meghan arrived for the procession, the argument had followed her there like a shadow, and when Meghan finally realized the rehearsal argument had followed her into the ceremony, the room became too small for silence. The confrontation happened away from the crowd, but it carried the force of a public sentence. Meghan crossed the room toward Anne, not shouting, not pleading, but demanding the one thing the monarchy rarely gives in moments like this: an explanation. Anne did not step back. She did not apologize. She stood with the stillness of someone who had already weighed the cost and chosen the crown anyway. Meghan stopped close enough for Anne to understand there would be no easy escape. The crown, in plain terms, means the royal institution itself. The power, image, rules, and public duty carried by the family as a whole. That was what Anne believed she was protecting. Meghan believed something very different. She believed the institution had used duty as a shield, and silence as a weapon. Her name had been removed from the walking order, the planned sequence showing who walks where during a major royal event, and the change had happened before she was even allowed to object. Anne kept her voice low when Meghan asked why she had been taken out of the senior line. The senior line meant the most visible group in the procession, the part of the walk that cameras and guests would read as the heart of the family. Anne answered that the ceremony required stability, and Meghan's place near the front would pull attention away from the purpose of the day. Meghan heard the words, but she heard the judgment beneath them more clearly. Stability meant exclusion. Purpose meant punishment. Harry stood close enough to step in, and that closeness made his silence worse. Meghan's voice tightened as she asked Anne whether this was discipline, revenge, or simply another way to make her invisible. Anne's expression barely moved. Harry looked from his wife to the Princess Royal and felt the trap closing around him. If he defended Meghan too sharply, the confrontation could spill through the doors. If he stayed quiet, Meghan would feel abandoned before the walk even began. Anne finally revealed, through a recorded private exchange later described in a palace account, that the decision had been discussed before Meghan arrived. That single detail changed everything. Meghan had not been reacting to a mistake. She had walked into a decision already made, already approved, already waiting for her like a locked door. Harry understood it at the same moment Meghan did. The humiliation had been planned with calm hands. Charles entered briefly, and the room tightened around him. The king, meaning the ruling monarch with final authority over royal decisions, saw Meghan's face and knew exactly what his silence would cost. Charles looked toward Anne. Then he gave one small nod. Meghan saw it. Harry saw it. Anne accepted it without a word. That nod shattered the last fragile hope that Charles would overrule his sister. Once he walked away, the balance of power became brutally clear. Anne was not acting alone. Power inside the palace rarely announces itself. It moves through pauses, glances, and decisions no one dares to challenge. Anne did not need a public title to control the room. She had discipline, history, and the king's trust. Meghan had visibility. Harry had anger. But in that corridor, the person with the least drama held the most authority, and everyone knew it. Anne had built that authority over decades, not by asking for attention, but by refusing to need it. She had become the royal others turned to when emotion threatened to overtake duty. Duty, in royal terms, means the public responsibility to protect the crown's image before private feelings. That was why Charles relied on her. The king could hesitate. He could feel the pull of Harry's pain. Anne could make the hard choice and carry it, without explaining herself to the room. Charles sat alone with the final procession order and understood exactly what had been done. The procession order was the written plan showing who would walk where during the ceremony, and this paper had become more than a schedule. It was a quiet verdict. Meghan had been placed outside the senior formation. Harry would see it. The cameras would see it. The public would read the distance before anyone said a word. Charles set the paper down and stared at it without speaking, because he knew the wound would travel straight to his son. William entered quietly, careful with every step and every word. The prince understood that confusion on the day would damage everyone, not just Meghan. If Anne's decision was reversed at the last second, the ceremony would look weak. If Meghan was allowed back into the senior line after protest, the family would look divided. William told Charles that the monarchy could not afford another scene before the doors opened. Charles listened, and the future king saw the pain in his father's silence. Catherine knew the decision would look cold, but she also understood the danger of undoing it. Catherine had watched enough royal storms to know that power is damaged when it is shown bending under pressure. If Anne was overruled in front of Meghan and Harry, the Princess Royal would look powerless, and the entire order of the day would begin to shake. Catherine felt the cruelty of the moment, but she also saw the trap. Compassion could save one person's pride while breaking the ceremony's discipline. Anne's purpose had been clear from the beginning. The revised order had been approved to stop Meghan from becoming the emotional center of the ceremony. That was the secret no one wanted spoken aloud. Meghan's presence near the front would not be read as unity. It would be read as surrender, repair, victory, or defeat, depending on who was watching. Anne wanted none of that. She wanted the procession to move like the crown itself, controlled, polished, untouchable. The choice had now hardened beyond comfort. Charles had allowed it. William had supported the logic of it. Catherine had accepted the necessity of it. Anne had carried it. And Meghan, still waiting beyond the line that had been drawn around her, was about to feel what that control truly meant. Because once the doors opened, the private humiliation became impossible to hide. The procession began without her. That was the wound. Not a statement. Not an announcement. A movement. Anne stepped forward with measured calm. Charles followed the order before him. William kept his face controlled, and Catherine moved with quiet discipline. Meghan stood apart. close enough to see everything, far enough for the world to understand she had been placed outside the frame. Meghan felt the cut before the crowd understood it. The official procession line, the arranged group of royals who walked together to show rank, unity, and public belonging, had moved on without her. Anne had not shouted Meghan out. Anne had done something sharper. She had allowed the formation to speak. Charles stayed in the order because hesitation would expose the fracture. William kept his gaze forward because cameras would turn one glance into a headline. Catherine moved with restraint, but she knew the distance around Meghan was no accident. Harry watched the gap open, and his anger had nowhere safe to go. Meghan lifted her chin as the family passed, yet her eyes stayed fixed on Anne, waiting for the woman who made the decision to turn back. Anne never did. That refusal mattered, because the ceremony was meant to prove the family could stand together after years of wounds. Instead, it showed the opposite. Meghan could attend. Meghan could be present. But Meghan could not stand inside the royal picture. A courtier moved to the side table and removed Meghan's name card from the procession list. The courtier did not make a scene, but the gesture carried the force of a final stamp. That card had marked her place, and its removal confirmed what Meghan already feared. This was not confusion. The change had been final from the start. Harry saw the card disappear, and his jaw tightened as if struck without sound. William noticed too, and the silence around him grew heavier. The prince chose calm over personal rescue, because one step toward Harry or Meghan would have broken the controlled face of the day. Catherine understood that choice, even as she felt the sadness inside it. Charles understood it as well, and the king kept moving, because stopping would mean admitting Anne's decision had wounded more than one person. Meghan did not break in public. That restraint became its own kind of power. But Harry knew the stillness was dangerous. Anne had won the procession. Charles had preserved the ceremony. William had protected the image, and Catherine had survived with quiet sorrow. Yet Meghan had carried the humiliation in full view. And when the ceremony ended, Harry finally stepped into the room where silence could no longer protect anyone. The turning point came without aides, without cameras, and without the safety of ceremony. Harry found Anne in a private room after the procession and closed the door behind him. Meghan did not speak at first. Anne looked at them both with the same iron calm she had carried all day. But this time, Harry's voice carried the pain of a son, a husband, and a prince who knew the family had made its choice. Harry asked the question Anne had been waiting for. Was the exclusion meant to humiliate Meghan, or had the palace hidden cruelty behind order? The procession, in plain terms, was the formal walk showing who belonged at the center of a royal ceremony. And being removed from it meant being pushed out of the public symbol of family unity. Meghan heard that truth in every silence. Anne answered that the decision protected the procession, not individual feelings. Meghan finally spoke, and the room changed. She told Anne that standing aside while the family moved without her felt like being erased in plain sight. Meghan did not ask for sympathy. She asked why attendance was allowed if belonging was forbidden. Anne held her ground, because to her, royal protocol meant the rules and customs used to keep ceremonies controlled and above personal conflict. She told Meghan the crown could not keep bending around unresolved wounds. Harry's anger broke through the restraint he had carried all day. He accused the family of using protocol as a weapon, of taking a rule meant for order and turning it into punishment. Anne did not flinch. She told Harry that duty could not be rebuilt every time private pain entered the room. That answer struck him because it sounded less like defense and more like judgment. Meghan looked away, and Harry knew she heard the same finality. Anne then admitted, through a recorded private conversation later preserved in a palace account, that she had advised Charles after the Windsor Memorial rehearsal dispute that Meghan should not walk in the senior line. The senior line was the most visible part of the procession, the place viewers read as trust and acceptance. Harry understood at once. This had not been confusion. It had been a private judgment passed weeks earlier and carried into the ceremony. Meghan moved first. She opened the door before Harry finished speaking, and her exit cut deeper than any reply. Anne watched her go, still controlled, still certain. Harry stayed behind for one final breath, staring at the woman who had forced truth into daylight. By the next morning, the world was no longer discussing the ceremony. It was discussing the woman left out of it. By sunrise, the humiliation had escaped the palace walls. It was no longer a private decision wrapped in royal procedure. It was a headline, a broadcast, a photograph, a national argument. The world saw Meghan standing apart while the procession moved without her, and every viewer understood the message. Anne had not raised her voice. She had done something far more powerful. She had changed the picture. Meghan saw the front pages before she heard the full broadcast. The palace tried to call it protocol, meaning the long-standing rules and customs used to control royal ceremonies. But the public had already chosen a simpler word: rejection. One London newspaper placed the image across its front page, Meghan standing alone near the aisle while the family moved ahead, and the headline cut through every careful explanation. Outside the line. Meghan stared at it without speaking. Harry pushed the paper away with anger he could no longer hide. Anne read the same coverage with a still face, but one aide noticed her pause longer than usual over Meghan's photograph. That pause mattered because Anne had never wanted chaos. She had wanted control. Yet the very decision meant to protect the ceremony had become the ceremony's only story. The aide stood nearby, waiting for a comment, but Anne gave none. She simply folded the page, set it down, and let silence defend what words could only inflame. Harry listened as a broadcaster framed the moment as the clearest royal separation since the family's public fractures began. The broadcaster repeated the phrase again during the morning bulletin, and by then it had become more than commentary. It became a verdict. Meghan had not been removed from a private hallway. She had been removed from the public symbol of belonging. That was why the image spread so quickly. It gave people a shape for years of tension they already believed existed. Palace aides tried to steady the story, but their words arrived too late. They said the order followed ceremonial needs, and ceremonial needs simply meant the practical structure of who stands, walks, and appears where during a formal royal event. But viewers did not care about structure. They cared about the gap. They cared about Meghan's face. They cared that Anne walked forward and never looked back. The explanation sounded neat. The picture felt brutal. Anne understood the cost by midday. Meghan understood it earlier. Harry understood it the moment the newspaper hit the table. The public had chosen its image, and no palace statement could take it back. Yet the final meaning of the moment still belonged to the family that created it. And inside the palace, after the noise had spread everywhere, the truth of Anne's decision finally settled on everyone involved. In the end, the procession was never just about where Meghan walked. It was about where the monarchy believed she belonged. Anne made the decision with the cold certainty of duty. Meghan received it as a public wound. Harry saw it as betrayal. Charles allowed it because he feared disorder more than heartbreak. And the crown, once again, protected its shape by sacrificing someone's pride. Anne's action became the defining moment of the ceremony, because it turned private distrust into public structure. The crown, in simple words, means the royal institution itself. The rules, image, duty, and power that stand above any one person's feelings. Anne believed she was defending that institution from another public storm. Meghan believed the institution had used its power to place her outside the circle. That difference mattered, because both women left the day carrying opposite truths. Anne saw control. Meghan felt rejection. Meghan's final image from that day was not defeat. It was controlled pain. She stood upright while the family moved without her. And that restraint made the moment even sharper. Meghan had arrived believing presence might still mean acceptance. But the procession proved something colder. Royal acceptance was not restored by arrival. It was not restored by visibility. It had to be granted by those still holding power. And Anne had made it clear that no such grant was coming. Harry left with a wound of his own. He loved Meghan, but he also understood the language of the monarchy better than most. The procession, a formal royal walk used to show rank, unity, and belonging during a ceremony, had sent a message without needing a single public word. Harry knew what the message meant. His wife had not simply been moved aside. She had been shown where the family believed the boundary now stood. Charles's silence became its own decision. The king had allowed Anne to do what he could not say aloud, and that silence gave the humiliation its final force. Charles could have changed the order. He could have softened the moment. He could have stepped between duty and pain. Instead, he let Anne close the circle, and once that circle closed, Meghan was left outside it. Anne's verdict was simple and ruthless. The procession belonged to the institution, not to personal repair. The humiliation marked a permanent emotional boundary. Meghan was not merely shut out of a walk. She was shown that the royal circle would close without her, and Anne became the figure who closed it. There is no softer ending to this moment. Anne protected the monarchy. Meghan carried the humiliation. Harry absorbed the betrayal, and the crown moved forward exactly as it always has. Polished, silent, and unforgiving. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.